Hello and welcome to this Accountancy Age Financial Director and the Global Treasurer webinar in partnership with AccessPay. I'm Tom Lemon, reporter for all three titles and your host for today. Today we are discussing what finance teams are doing right now as they seek to learn lessons from the ongoing pandemic. As we all know, the pandemic has touched so many parts of normal life and the finance function was not exempt from its consequences. It revealed an over-reliance on manual processes, inefficient legacy systems, cumbersome paper and/or in-person authorizations, and an overall lack of digital integration between back-office systems and banks. But as we approach nearly a year of social distancing measures and lockdowns and working from home, the question is, what have we learned and what are we doing to adapt now? With me to discuss all this and more are three great guests. So first we have Kieran O'Donnell, who is the CFO and co-founder of Virtual FD. Kieran is a freelance finance director. He started his business Virtual FD in 2010 on a mission to help new businesses who needed FD-level advice but weren't ready for a full-time role. Since then, he's advised over 60 ambitious startups and fast-growth businesses, helping them to grow, prepare to sell, stay on track, whatever's needed. Thanks to this, he was also named CFO of the Year at the British Accountancy Awards in 2019. Then we have Waqas Ahmed, financial transformation expert. With over 12 years of experience in finance, Waqas has worked his way from financial analyst at IBM Global to being one of the leads in finance intelligent automation capability at KPMG, before recently transitioning to a new role at another Big Four accountancy firm. And last but not least, we have Anish Kapoor, CEO of AccessPay. Anish is a chartered accountant who has run both small UK-focused and large multinational finance teams as FD or CFO. He's also a serial entrepreneur who has founded several technology businesses. He started AccessPay because he found that finance functions were poorly served by technology, in particular from their banks. In his words, AccessPay is on a mission to reinvent the way finance teams use technology to work with their banks, freeing them up to give better data and insights to the business. So, enough of me talking. We are going to have a poll question to start us off. So we'd love for you to get involved. So the question is, do you believe the finance function needs to change significantly in 2021? And it's very simple, yes or no. And while you're doing that, I'll just alert you to the Q&A function. So if you do have any questions for the speakers, there will be time for that at the end. So please write in your questions that you can see on the platform. And until then, we'll do that at the end. But until then, let's get to the poll questions, answers, and the results. So hopefully I've given you enough time. So do you believe the finance function needs to change significantly in 2021? 72.6% of you said yes, and just 27.4% said no. So that's quite a resounding yes, it seems. Anish, so we start with you. Welcome. What do you make of those results?
Yeah, hi Tom. Thanks. I'm not surprised, and I'm very heartened to see such a high level of people expecting, change and yet more change, because I think there's a lot more to come in 2021 in terms of impact of furlough schemes ending, possibility of yet another wave of infections as lockdowns are released. So I think there's a lot more that's yet to hit us. So kind of great to see that the bulk of people are expecting that and are getting ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Waqas, welcome as well. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think this is broadly in line with what I anticipated. I think majority of the companies that we've seen are looking to change and adjust their ways of working given what's happened in the last year. I think it's been an eye-opener for a lot of organizations to see we can actually work in a slightly different way than we did before. Fundamentally, when we had times where we were just having to be office bound, or we had to run workshops or collaboration sessions in person, and all of that has changed. And that means that there's going to be a significant change within the way we work. So I'm not surprised to see majority of the people actually agreeing that we will change how finance functions work going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So that little starter poll for us there brings us on nicely to our next topic of changes in 2021. So, Kieran, welcome to you as well. What should the finance team's priorities be in 2021 as you see it?
Yeah, hi Tom. I think with my finance director hat on, if the business needs safeguarding, the clear priority for the finance function is to help ensure that. And if the business is growing, I guess the finance function needs to help fund it. So I think, overall, finance teams need to just continue to engage with the rest of the business to ensure that the finance team or function are central to what's happening, whether it's strategic or whether it's tactical. And I think, certainly in the current climate, looking forward is more important than ever. So, strong, agile forecasting is a must, but it requires not just the finance function, but the finance function helping a whole organization to continue to look forward, just in a constant state of readiness as to, what's coming down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. Waqas, what do you think? Are those priorities good?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think what we would normally see and what we expect is some sort of a normalization taking place, going back to the ways of some sort of a normalization. It's not going to be back to 100% the way we were, and then there is a element of flexibility that we want to see in finance function, and I think that's going to be a priority for finance, is to be able to be agile going forward. If we have additional waves coming through and we go into that same situation of lockdown, non-lockdown play, then we need to think that through and be able to show that flexibility very quickly to make sure the finance becomes operational at the same time we take off and give in as we require it. And then following that, I think there has been a significant readjustments within the broader economy, and that will start to reflect in some of the companies, and efficient finance becomes much more required for each of the organizations. So how do we actually make sure the finance are efficient and cost effective is going to become a key for quite a lot of industries. I know there has been some winners and some losers within this arena in because of COVID, and the people who've suffered a little bit more would require that adjustment to become more efficient. So I think that would become quite a priority as well.
Yeah, I was interviewing some people a few weeks back, and they said part of the problem was that in 2021 there's going to be a much more even distribution of the problems caused by the pandemic, rather than some companies being okay and some really struggling. It's going to be a bit more of an even playing field because of tax changes, for example. Anish, slightly different question for you. A lot has changed in 2020. Will things change even more this year, and how do you see that happening?
Yeah, so I think, as I sort of alluded to at the beginning, I think we definitely see a lot more change coming in 2021, and I think actually just just picking up on, I think, something that both, or the points that both Kieran and sort of Waqas made. What we're definitely seeing is this kind of demand on the finance function for, being more forward-looking, but also being more efficient. You see what I mean? So it's kind of like two competing demands, right? And we only see that kind of getting worse really through 2021, because I think if you look at the things that are going to hit, the economy, the country as a whole, you've got some pretty big shocks, right? You've got things like the end of the furlough scheme, and things like the business support grants and what have you. You've got the fact that there probably will be, yet another wave of infections. If you look at all the sort of modelling from the various advisors to government, that's what they're sort of predicting. So, the amount of change, the rate of change will continue through 2021. It's only going to kind of exacerbate really the issues that the finance team are under that, both Kieran and Waqas outlined earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran, how do you see the changes in 2021 happening?
Yeah, I think so much has happened in the past, I suppose, 12, 14 months, that we're probably all used to quite a lot of change happening. I think, as the other guys have mentioned, 2021 is, it's going to require the same level of readiness. Some of the businesses I work with have been unaffected really by anything other than teams working from home. But we still have, a need for the finance function to confirm to the rest of the leadership where we are and give them kind of safeguards. But also there's businesses I work with who, their whole business has been on ice for 12, 13 months, so like just within the travel sector. And I suppose the change for those businesses is how can you restart your business? So you have to de-ice the business, I guess. So maybe 2021 will be a positive impact as those activities can get restarted. But I think you have a lot of people listening in today who do forecasting anyway will probably find that they're producing many different scenarios or sensitivities, not necessarily all at the same time, but over the next week or month or 6 months, they'll find that there's a constant state of change in their particular marketplace, whether it's customer-led or supplier-led or other kind of macro issues that they're trying to feed into, crunch something, and then feed it up to their leadership as to where it leaves them financially.
Yeah, and I guess leading on from some of the things you just touched on there, Kieran, I was wondering, Waqas, how important is mindset going to be for finance leaders and finance teams generally when they deal with so much changing all the time, whether it be, the government support, whether it be the actual restrictions that we live with in our day-to-day lives? How important is mindset?
It'll be absolutely critical. As Kieran was mentioning earlier, there are businesses that needs to be just literally unfrozen. They have been, in that hibernation mode for 12, 14 months. And to be in the mindset of that financial director who run a successful business and had to freeze everything and is unsure about the upcoming tax changes, upcoming impact from Brexit, upcoming impacts from all the different levies and sort of support that's being provided by the government, and how do we forecast without really knowing and understanding what some of those impacts will be. It'd be very critical for them to try and get their head around that. And in some cases, because there's no clarity available, it will be a challenge and a stressful situation for individuals to deal with from an overall financial perspective. But even if you don't look at it from a overall business perspective, individually, at individual and personal level, all of the employees that have had different ways of working in the last 12 to 14 months will probably go into another transition of some sort, going back into work or maybe even coming back into home working again. And that transition could potentially be stressful for a lot of employees because their entire arrangements around, say, childcare, around homeschooling, etc., would continue to change. And that uncertainty creates a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. And I think we will continue to see people with a positive mindset who can actually make it through this, would thrive and survive through this situation. Others would actually start to struggle, and we need to be able to kind of continue to support those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess linking to those sort of three questions that we've been discussing. There's going to be a lot of change, and a company, Anish, like Access Pay, a fintech like Access Pay, they're hoping to bring that change to other companies. But where exactly do they come into the equation?
So
it's a great question. Yeah.
Yep. Go for it.
I'm sorry, Waqas, go on.
Apologies. No. And Anish, please go ahead.
Okay. So I think as we talked about earlier, the finance functions under these two competing pressures. Number one, to look forward and provide more forward guidance, and number two, to be more efficient. And that's really where a fintech like ourselves, like Access Pay, comes in. That's what we do. We help finance teams free up time and get access to the data that they need faster. And we do that by basically digitizing a process that sits at the heart of finance, right? Which is getting data to and from your banks. And amazingly, that's a process that's remains unchanged for the best part of 20 years, largely down to the technology that the banks have. But we are now working with kind of all of the major banks globally to kind of help them, transform what was, very basic online banking capability into something that can be, fully digital and completely integrated into a finance function systems. And in doing that, it frees up just a huge amount of people who were just, manually processing data. And, you're looking at maybe 25, 30, 40% of time freed up for a finance team. And it also gives them access to a whole set of data in real time about their cash and money coming in, money going out, all of which, is kind of really important to be on top of, particularly at this moment in time. So I think that, that's where we see ourselves slotting into all of this and really helping, the sort of thousands of customers that we work with today.
Awesome. Okay. And we're going to move on to looking at managing the finance function remotely. So I was wondering, I guess all three of you will have good experience of seeing different finance teams and different companies and how they're handling it. So I was wondering, Kieran, if we start with you, is remote working still a problem for finance teams?
I mean, for me, it hasn't been a problem because this was my world pre-COVID. The whole idea of working with early stage companies. I'm, call myself a virtual FD, so I guess I'm virtual. But bookkeepers are in one location. I'm in another location. The business or the CEO or the exec are in another location. So I guess we've been quite used to this space of being, online and reachable, and just using cloud applications and workflows to streamline how we work because, we're I suppose the role is not full time, but that aside, I'm acutely aware that the past 14 months has been quite disruptive for many people who just don't necessarily have the physical space to work from home. They don't have the setup, at least initially didn't have the setup, or some just don't have the headspace to be able to or to want to work from home. And even in, people listening in today with kids will know that homeschooling is just an added challenge for so many as well. So you're trying to do your day job, and at the same time you're trying to keep your kids in front of some schoolwork. I mean, I've got 3 kids homeschooling at the moment, which makes things a little busy when you're, working on an investment plan and you've got a daughter beside you and you're trying to, keep the paint on the page. So I've been very open with my clients about my need for things to be flexible, but also I'm very mindful of all the other people I work with and the companies I work with, that they all need to make sure that they have the flexibility in how they work. And I think, certainly since Christmas for sure, I mean, we're kind of hopefully we'll be out of homeschooling in the next 5 weeks. I think it's been a big mindset change for a lot of people to be able to stick your hand up and say, look, I know what needs to be done, but we can smooth out and change some workflows in order that we can support a family life if that's needed, or if people just have other kind of, health and well-being issues to be factored into, everyone else can be just made aware of it and, adjust accordingly. So it's a two-way thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Anish, what are you seeing? Is it still a difficulty?
Yeah, I think it is, because the problem is the guidance has changed quite rapidly or a lot, the last 12 months. So it was, go to the office, don't go to the office, lockdown, lockdown's lifted, and then it's lockdown again. So it was difficult for businesses, I think, to really understand, well, what is the long-term solution here, right? Should we be geared up for, our finance teams being essentially remote, or should we just treat this as a short-term issue and carry on with all the same processes, but just have people doing them from home, right? And I think now we're seeing a real shift to businesses saying, you know what, we just need to reconfigure the way we think about our finance operations, because we're not going to get back to having everyone back in the office anytime soon. Even when, lockdown is lifted, there's a lot of people that don't want to go back into the office, and so you have to now cater for this mixed environment. And I think the thing with the finance function is it brings a whole level of risk that doesn't apply to other functions in the business, right? So we're dealing with cash, we're dealing with sensitive information, and we've seen a lot of finance teams subject to more phishing attacks, more viruses, because you've got people now sat at home, logging into banks, from their home network, or sometimes even from shared computers that, the kids are using for their homework and what have you. So there's actually quite a fundamental shift that needs to happen for finance teams to be, configured, if you like, for secure remote working. And we are seeing that shift now. But I think the guidance from government hasn't helped finance teams to make that shift up to this point. We're seeing businesses just making that shift of their own volition now.
Yeah, and Waqas, Anish mentioned there, like looking at sort of long-term solutions, but what should they be? If you're part of a finance team that's still struggling with remote working and you're looking to solve that problem, should you be looking at a long-term solution or a short-term solution?
It's a very difficult one to sort of really answer. I think it would definitely depend by industry, but at the same time, we need to understand that current ways of working will change significantly. I have advised and been working with a number of organizations where they are actively considering how their office space would reduce, and in some cases up from 30 to 40% reduction in their office space, just because they need to reorganize the way they work. A lot more people are expected to work from home and would like to work from home. And we would also see quite a sizable shift in the way our workplaces are set out. So if you go into offices now, in general, there's much more consideration around space, about how people are located, the ways of working in terms of even within the office, so sort of spaces where they can actually have your webinars, etc. So all of that will change and reorganize. So whatever happens in the long term, we will start to see a shift and a change happening, and we need to kind of consider that when we're thinking about the future. So the long-term planning should include some sort of a normalization, going back to that normalization, but at the same time, there is a new ways of working, and how do we make sure people are addressing those challenging for the new ways of working? And Kieran mentioned and picked up on a really good point, and so did Anish, around security and in the office setup. So we have a lot more challenges when it comes to internet security and the cyber security space. Providing a basic VPN to the employees to try to log on to is just not sufficient. There are additional layers of security that needs to be put into place, and similarly the ways of working in terms of individuals don't have the office set up, and if we expect the employees to go back to 2 days a week working from home, have we given them the sufficient structure to be able to, work from home? Have they got the right chair, the right tables? What happens for their long-term health, and how do they actually cope with that? So there will be a lot of consideration in terms of how the new ways of working will happen, and that needs to go into your long-term planning.
Yeah, I think that brings us on nicely to the next topic of, when lockdown does eventually end. Obviously, we've spoken about remote working and the current situation, but it will end eventually. There will be some sort of normality, even though it doesn't look like it anytime particularly soon. We might be surprised in terms of the vaccine. So, Anish, sort of, what do finance teams need to do to prepare for a more normal life?
I think it definitely comes back to this, they've almost, if you like, educated the rest of the business, or the rest of the business will have now gotten used to this, kind of much more forward-looking guidance from the finance team, the production of reports and management information much quicker, the provision of data much quicker to them, and the value of the perception, the value of that to the business, and the perception that that's what the finance team should be doing, I think has really increased. So the finance function, if you like, is not going to get brownie points for just doing the basics of reporting and doing all the processes that need to happen, under the bonnet to make reporting and the provision of data happen. So what we're seeing amongst all of our customers is this kind of investment, if you like, in saying, right, well, we need to sort of automate as much of the the operations of the finance function as possible, and kind of redeploy or reallocate or retrain the people that we've got to do much more of that forward-looking kind of value-added activity. So there's almost this kind of reconfiguration going on within the finance teams, and so what we're seeing is finance teams now, if they hadn't kicked off projects towards the latter end of last year, they're certainly kicking off projects now with a view that by the middle of this year that they're able to operate in this different mode, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Kieran, what are you seeing with your clients that you help?
I think it will mean lockdown ending will mean different things for different businesses. Aside from some businesses will mean they can reopen their doors. Lockdown will end, but those within the travel space, for example, are probably still digesting quarantine hotels and the impact on travel, and anyone involved in that industry is probably trying to work out what this year looks like. I think is on a functional basis, I know finance functions like small teams where the finance person or small team have been furloughed, on a flexi furlough, so 40% of their time. So I guess they'll just need to work out that when they come back, they aren't just hit by a wall of to-dos. I think there's been a lot of positives out of the last 12 months where finance functions have just prioritized what is needed and what what was never needed. So it's been a great kind of clear out almost of processes which are just old and cumbersome. And Anish and he always mentioned from a streamlining point of view, there's great opportunities. I think there's a huge amount where that will hopefully continue. And then I'm not saying the finance teams will necessarily find that they've got a huge amount of free time on their hands, but I think there will be a kind of rebalancing with their organization as to what things continue, what further innovations can be made. And just going back to the point about working conditions, I mean, it's almost like I think it can be. There's a lot of positives in how this can work from a CFO, FD kind of head of the function and their teams. The way that lockdown and full teams can return to one office, can work from home, can find a hybrid approach. I think great teams and bosses are going to figure this one out, because I think there's an element of the finance industry is full of obviously people who want to work full time, but there's a whole bunch of people who, whether they're solo parents or whether they're single parents or whether they just want to readjust their career, stay involved and, but still kind of find a work-life balance. We'll find that we've had 12, 15 months of working quite flexibly, getting the job done, but just not in a 9-to-5 manner. And I think lockdown ending will hopefully mean that, that part of the jobs market for a lot of people, male and female, can still continue, where you can bring in talent to do the job, but you're not necessarily advertising a full-time role that's stuck in an office. It can actually coexist with, other things, that life throws at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Waqas, there might be people on this call, on this webinar that are sort of thinking, well, if I can just get through the next few months and then things start to get back to pretty much normal fairly soon after, why can't I just go back to the old ways of doing things? Why would you say that it's important not to go back to the old ways of working?
Yes, there's definitely a lot of perspectives that we need to take into consideration when we're thinking about going back to old ways of working. From a business perspective overall, I think we mentioned earlier about the economy will rebalance itself. There will be winners and losers. There will be impacted parties, but it'll continue to readjust as we go along. So, for example, if companies have started to consider, which I know have, to take out office space, for example, because there's an additional layer of people working from home, you start to see much more of an impact on the retail footfall, or people where, if I was going out for buying lunch 5 days a week, now I'm doing it only 3 days a week. So that's going to impact and change the way things are working on sort of economical scales. From a business perspective, that will start to see some rebalancing within the finance function at the back office for companies impacted both positively and negatively. At a corporate level, if we start to go down that route of, going back to the way of working, you will have to start to change with that to say, we will start to see much more of a working from home environment. But if you look at it from a personal level, I think it's very, very important not to actually go back to the way we were working before. Everyone avoiding an hour's commute into work is a positive. You don't have to do it. If you do it for less time than you did before, it's much more effective. People have started to rebalance and understand, the time that you get to spend with your family is much more important as well now that, that rebalancing will happen as well from a personal perspective. So from a personal perspective, I think there's various different things that we need to consider, given the fact that it gives us more time. People have been more productive at home in some cases, and in majority of the cases, and they start to actually reconnect back with their families and the units that they actually belong to, and that's really helped as well. So from a personal and corporate level, things will change, and we just need to be able to adjust, adapt, and make sure that we actually make the most of it.
Absolutely. Great answer. So we're going to go to another poll here. So this one is the exact same as last time in terms of process, but the question is, what should be the top priority for finance leaders in 2021? And we've got the option of mental health, remote working, digital transformation, agility, or other. Interesting. Mental health, agility, remote working or digital transformation or other. Not sure what's going to be the big one on that. So we'll give you just another few seconds on that. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, please send them through, because we will try to get to them in just a couple of minutes. But for now, let's go to the results. So top priority for finance leaders in 2021 should be either digital transformation or agility, with that taking up a combined 82.4%. Mental health, a distant third with 13%. Remote working just under 4%, and no one selecting other. So yeah, Anish, what do you make of those results?
I think it definitely ties into what we're seeing with the organisations that we work with. So, like I said, definitely this move towards digital transformation, as a way to, I suppose, enable this kind of change in how the finance team operates. And you kind of have to have access to the right data and have the right tools to be able to give the business the right answers. You see what I mean? And in the right time frames. And then tied into that is a change in the mix of the team, right? A change in the mix of the skills of the team. These are sort of projects that are going to take 12, 18 months to work through, but once done, they completely transform what the finance function is able to deliver to the business. And I think to Kieran's point and Wakas's point, this shouldn't be seen as negative. We have lots of conversations with finance functions in organisations, and the organisation as a whole is growing. It sees this as a lot of opportunity in the marketplace, and it sees the finance function as helping it be a key enabler of things like maybe M&A or helping it to free up capital from other parts of his business to invest in new products and new services, or maybe digitization of another part of the business. So there's lots of positives, if you like, and I think it's approaching everything with that positive mindset and saying, right, we've got to transform, we've got to change, not for negative reasons, but for positive reasons.
Yeah, and that leads on nicely then to our next topic of future-proofing and technology. So, a central element in a lot of what you've been saying, Anish, is how finance teams interface with their banks. And have you seen that tech here has sort of generally changed from being this sort of nice to have to now people are recognizing that this is a must-have? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I think I'll probably give a different perspective on this because we work with all of the major banks. What they're seeing is a huge increase in their customers going to them saying, hey, look, we've got to change the way that we interact with you. It kind of worked when we were in an office, but it doesn't work now. We're all remote, and we need to have a much more integrated sort of digital connection with you. So that's what the banks themselves are seeing, and it's many orders of magnitude increase in terms of a demand for that from their own customer base. I guess in terms of where we kind of so in terms of has it become a must-have, I would say the answer to that is definitely yes now, because it ties into this kind of digitization agenda of the finance function, and it's all sort of interlinked, and all part of, I guess, finance teams, treasury teams looking at how should we operate going forwards. And I think, as we've just talked about, you simply can't go back to doing what you were doing 2 years ago. It just isn't going to work long term.
Yeah. Kieran, you're the virtual FD. Is that how you see it with your clients, that it's gone from being sort of nice to must?
From a future-proofing perspective?
Yeah, just having technology generally, yeah.
I think because I suppose I'm working with businesses that are looking to grow rapidly. So I tend to think of future-proofing really covering scale-up. So the business is going to grow, and we need to have tools in place that can support that growth. And then the second one is some sort of exit or something happening at some point in the future. So we just want to be honest now. So should we go through due diligence or some sort of process later, from an M&A point of view, where we're acting like a large entity, even though we're quite a small one. So I guess that mindset does help us think about plug and playing into, we don't go crazy, but plug and playing when it comes to sensible, automation or semi-automation, just to reduce the manual burden of processing. But at the same time, we don't open the floodgates to every automation that's just not the right fit. So sometimes you just need to think carefully about, there's so many plug-and-play tools and apps out there that are designed to just free up your finance function, and it allows the finance function to just push better information, and I suppose advisory is the buzzword, but just help the leadership know where it's at and where it's going, rather than being stuck just dealing with a pile of numbers. So I think the apps are there, the technology is there. All our LinkedIn news feeds are full of people either selling or sharing their experiences. It's a really positive space to be in. I think embracing what's right for your business to some degree future-proofs your business from from the pandemic we're in, because your mindset, back to the poll, I think it's quite fresh to see that digital and agility is the top two. It's probably how everyone on this call thinks. These are the things that turn us into better accountants or FDs or CFOs, or if we're within a finance function, gets us thinking with an FD, CFO mindset a lot sooner in our careers. So I think there's a lot of positives that come out of that. And, as you grow, Anish has explained about Access Pay. It's businesses I work with are too small for that, where they're directly kind of pitching. But it's definitely within your radar to say that when we get to, not every business will get to 30, 50 mil turnover, but certainly the businesses that are on track to get to that level should be then looking for even easier solutions to, again, further streamline what will be a bigger finance function with the right controls, the right safeguards, but still, again, be able to process what needs to be processed in a simple, clean, agile way.
Yeah, absolutely. And Waqas, just lastly, if we come to you before we go to the audience questions, do you think future-proofing, is that like a realistic goal for finance teams?
I genuinely believe that shouldn't be a goal. It's a must-have. It needs to be done. You need to be able to achieve some sort of future-proofing. 5-10 years ago, the amount of change that you see in finance function or the tech landscape was very limited. It was limited, but it wasn't at the pace that we currently have. There's on a very, very regular basis, on a daily basis, you are getting significant improvements and advancements in financial technologies. You are seeing a significant uptake of automation. Intelligent automation, particularly around sort of machine learning and artificial intelligence, is sort of creeping into our lives from all sort of angles and sides. So if you look at Alexa, look at Google, etc., there's a lot of use of artificial intelligence, and that's starting to creep into larger businesses very quickly as soon as you start to realize the benefits these are delivering. So we will have to catch up and make sure we are up to date with those future changes. And that's where the winners and losers are defined in the long term from a business perspective, because some businesses are able to adapt to technology much faster and adapt to the ways of working much faster, and therefore they'll move forward. And I think making sure that you pick up the right systems and right fintech to support you to try and get to the next layer of your transformation or what you want to deliver is really, really important. And considering it from a next 5-6 years perspective, what do I have to do to not necessarily just bring me up to speed to where I am currently, but what do I have to do for the future in 5 or 6 or 10 years' time, when much more of robotic process automation is in every single business, when there is much more artificial intelligence in every single business? Am I going to be still talking about sort of, downloading physical bank statements from the banks and then kind of reconciling them on Excel spreadsheets to make sure that my bank, my accounts reconcile? That we need to move away from that and go into this new way of working and make sure the automation is actually integrated in every single thing that we do.
Absolutely. Okay, that's great. Thanks, all three of you, for your insights there. So we've got a few questions from the audience, which is great. So the first one I'll put to you, Anish. Do you think the perceived productivity increase from working from home is sustainable, or does it need a return or partial return to the office to support that?
I guess it's going to vary depending on industry and what have you, but it's interesting. So I suppose what we've seen is, in terms of productivity increases from people working from home, I guess to Kieran's point, part of that is down to the flexibility. People no longer travelling in, fitting in work around their normal everyday lives. I just think it's going to be really hard to kind of remove that from people completely now. And I think we've covered that as part of this discussion, right? But I think as Kieran pointed out, we're going to have to continue to offer this kind of mixed way of working to get the best people, to be frank, because the finance function now to remain productive and to give the right kind of information to the business, it's about getting the best skills into the team. Maybe sometimes the best skills will only work part time. Well, you need to be able to support that. So I guess to answer the question, it's I think that productivity bonus can remain and indeed be improved upon, but you have to, I suppose, digitally transform the way the finance function works to actually support it and deliver it.
Okay, great. And then we've got another question here. It's basically saying, that we've spoken a lot about the changes that need to happen in the financial team, but how do you actually manage that? How do you encourage and secure that with all this uncertainty going on? Waqas, maybe you could answer that for us. How can we encourage the change in our teams?
I think it's kind of connected to what we've just talked about, what Anish was just mentioning as well. It's the productivity increase has actually materialized in a lot of cases because people, rather than actually traveling, are working slightly longer hours, a bit more focused in some sense. And that productivity increase is starting to show through. And we need to use that as a sort of a credit or incentive to try and give something back to the employees. And kind of outline the fact that they have worked hard in a slightly different, challenging environment, and that needs to be sort of credited back to them. And that incentivization needs to happen much more effectively to make sure that productivity increase that we've had or we've seen, because we're not using the facilities any longer, or we're using less of that facilities. We're not actually looking at, using some of the, the overhead costs that you would normally incur in the offices. Those incentivizations need to feed back into employees to try and get them to feel that, they are actually getting more value for money from working from home, and in a slightly different way, which is more beneficial for them and for the business as well.
Awesome, thank you. And Kieran, I guess we've got another question here that I think would be good for you. Sort of, what's the best innovation you've seen in the finance function in the past few months with all your different clients?